The first time my card declined, I was standing in front of a pharmacy cashier holding a bottle of ibuprofen and a box of allergy medicine. $16.43. I smiled politely, said there must be some mistake, and tried a different card. Declined. Then another. Declined. The woman behind me in line shifted her weight impatiently. I apologized, left the items on the counter, and walked back to my car with my hands perfectly steady. I didn't panic. I sat in the driver's seat of my Honda Accord and opened my banking app. The screen loaded slowly, the way it always did. And then I saw it, every account, every card, every joint fund we had built over 11 years of marriage, frozen. Access denied. Contact your financial institution. I closed the app. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. And I understood exactly what was happening. This was not an accident. This was Bradley. I met Bradley Whitmore when I was 26 years old and working as an administrative coordinator at a medical supply company in Richmond, Virginia. He was 32, a senior sales director with a corner office and a reputation for closing deals nobody else could close. He was charming in the way that certain men are charming, not loud, not obvious, but quietly confident. Like he had already decided you would say yes before you even knew the question. We dated for 2 years. We married on a Saturday afternoon in October, in a small ceremony at his family's country club. His mother wore cream and cried during the vows. My mother didn't attend, she had passed 3 years before, and my father had been gone since I was 9. I had no siblings. No aunts or uncles who stayed close. I was, in the language of Bradley's world, without complications. He said it like a compliment. At first, our marriage was pleasant enough. Bradley worked long hours. I managed the house, our schedules, his dry cleaning, his travel arrangements, his moods. I took a part-time job at a boutique interior design firm, something I had always loved, and I thought, perhaps, I might build something small for myself. But over time, the edges of our life together sharpened in ways I didn't immediately recognize. Bradley began asking questions about my hours. About my paychecks. About whether my little job was really worth the time I was spending away from home. He didn't forbid me from working. He simply made it clear, in 1,000 small ways, that my working was an inconvenience to him. So I stopped. Then he began managing the money. Not aggressively, not at first. He suggested that it made more sense for him to handle the accounts, since he understood how finance worked. He put me on a household budget. He gave me a credit card with a limit he set himself. He said it was easier this way. And it was easier. For him. For me, it was a slow vanishing. Every month, my name disappeared from something else. A bank statement. A utility bill. A decision. I didn't notice how much I had lost until the day I tried to open a savings account of my own and realized I had no income, no credit history in my name, and no proof that I existed outside of his. I was 41 years old. And I had become a ghost in my own life. The day Bradley locked me out of the accounts was a Tuesday in March. He came home from work at 6:15, the way he always did. I had made roasted chicken and potatoes. He ate without comment, then stood up and said, in a voice as calm as mine is now, "We need to talk." I wiped my hands on a dish towel and sat down at the kitchen table. He told me he had been thinking for a long time. That he had realized our marriage was no longer working. That I had become distant, uninvested, not the woman he married. He said he had consulted with an attorney. He said he was filing for divorce. I asked him what he wanted me to do. He looked at me with something close to amusement. "I want you to leave," he said. "Tonight. You can take a suitcase. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the rest." I asked about the money. "There is no money," he said. "Not for you. You didn't earn it. You don't get to take it." He explained, slowly, as if speaking to a child, that he had restructured our finances months ago. That everything was in his name. That I had no legal claim to any of it. He said I could try to fight him in court, but it would cost me more than I had, and he would win anyway. He smiled when he said it. I think he expected me to cry. To shout. To fall apart in front of him the way he had watched me fall apart so many times before, quietly, in private, where no one else could see. But I didn't. I asked him one question: how long do I have? He checked his watch. I'd like you out by 10. I nodded. I stood up. I walked upstairs, packed one suitcase, and left through the front door without saying goodbye. He watched me from the window as I drove away. I could feel his certainty radiating through the glass. He was so sure I would come back. That was the thing Bradley never understood about me. He saw my silence as weakness, my compliance as submission. He thought that because I never fought him, I had no fight in me at all. But silence is not surrender. Sometimes silence is simply patience. I drove 40 minutes north to a storage unit I had rented 18 months earlier, under my mother's maiden name, using an account Bradley knew nothing about. Inside that unit was a fireproof safe, a folder of documents, and a set of keys. I had been preparing for this day for a long time. What Bradley never knew, what I had been careful to never tell him, was that my mother had not died poor. She had been a quiet woman, like me. A woman who worked as a seamstress for 40 years, who lived in a small house in North Carolina, who never owned a new car or took a vacation farther than the coast. But she had inherited land from her father, 62 acres outside of Asheville, that had been in our family for 3 generations. When she died, I was named as her sole beneficiary. The land alone was worth several $100,000. But a developer approached me 2 years later with an offer to buy it for a resort project. I negotiated. I waited. I consulted with attorneys Bradley never met. In the end, I sold that land for $4.2 million. I never told Bradley. Not because I was hiding it maliciously, but because, by that point, I had already begun to understand who he was. I watched how he controlled our finances. I watched how he made me feel small. And I realized that if he ever discovered what I had, he would find a way to take it. So I kept it. I opened accounts in my name only, in a different state. I invested conservatively. I purchased property, a house in Virginia, about an hour from Richmond, under an LLC that couldn't be traced back to me without serious legal effort. I waited. And when the day came that he threw me out, I was ready. That first night, I stayed at a modest hotel near the interstate. I paid cash. I didn't use my phone. I wanted him to believe I was lost. Desperate. Alone. The next morning, I drove to my property. It sat on 12 acres of rolling Virginia countryside, a renovated Georgian estate with 6 bedrooms, a stone driveway, and iron gates at the entrance. I had visited it only twice since the purchase, always alone, always careful. The property manager kept it maintained. The gardens were immaculate. I parked in front of the house and sat there for a long time, looking at it. This was mine. Not Bradley's. Not ours. Mine. Over the next week, I did not contact him. I did not answer his calls, which came, at first, with increasing frequency, then stopped altogether. I did not respond to the 2 voicemails he left, both of which were calm and condescending, asking me to stop being dramatic and come home so we can discuss this like adults. I blocked his number on the 4th day. By then, I had already contacted my own attorney. I had begun the process of protecting my assets. I had started consulting with a forensic accountant to determine exactly what Bradley had hidden from me during our marriage, and what I might be entitled to in the divorce. I was not panicking. I was not begging. I was building. On the 7th day, Bradley found me. I don't know how. Perhaps he hired someone. Perhaps he bribed someone. Perhaps he simply got lucky. But at 4:17 in the afternoon, as I was sitting on the back patio of my estate drinking tea and watching the sun fall behind the tree line, I heard the buzz of the intercom at the front gate. I walked inside and looked at the security monitor. There he was, standing in front of his silver BMW, staring at the gates with a look I had never seen on his face before. Confusion. He pressed the intercom button. "Rachel?" I didn't answer. He pressed it again. "Rachel, it's me. Open the gate. I just want to talk." I watched him for a long moment. His jaw was tight. His shoulders were stiff. He looked like a man who had walked into a room expecting to find a mess, only to discover the furniture had been rearranged without his permission. I pressed the button. "What do you want, Bradley?" His voice came through the speaker, clipped and careful. "Where the hell are you? Whose house is this?" I let the silence stretch. "It's mine," I said. He didn't believe me. Not at first. He demanded to come inside. I refused. He threatened to call the police. I told him to go ahead. I had documentation proving ownership, and he was trespassing on private property. He stood at those gates for almost 20 minutes, pacing, muttering, occasionally stopping to stare at the house as if it might suddenly make sense to him. It never did. Finally, he got back in his car. Before he drove away, he leaned out the window and shouted something I couldn't quite hear. It didn't matter. I had already stopped listening to him. The divorce took 8 months. Bradley fought it, of course. He tried to argue that my inheritance should be considered marital property, that I had deceived him, that I had hidden assets illegally. None of it worked. My attorneys were better. My documentation was airtight. And in the end, the court ruled in my favor, not only protecting my estate, but awarding me a portion of Bradley's retirement accounts as compensation for the years I had spent without income or independence. He was furious. I heard, through mutual acquaintances, that he told people I had manipulated him, that I had planned this from the beginning, that I was not the woman he thought she was. He was right about that last part. I was never the woman he thought I was. I was the woman he refused to see. It has been 3 years now since I left that house with a single suitcase and a quiet certainty that I would never go back. I still live on my estate. I have started a small design consultancy, the work I always loved, and I take only the clients who interest me. I have dinner parties with friends I chose myself. I wake up in the mornings without dread. Sometimes I think about Bradley. Not with anger. Not with satisfaction. Just with a kind of distant curiosity, the way you might think about a storm that passed through years ago. He thought money was power. He thought silence meant surrender. He thought that if he took everything from me, I would come crawling back, grateful for whatever scraps he offered. But I didn't crawl. I walked. And when I stopped walking, I was standing in front of a house he never knew I owned, looking out at a life he never knew I'd built. That was the real revenge. Not the money. Not the mansion. Not watching his face crumble at the gates. It was knowing that I had never needed him. Not once.